Hello and welcome to the first installment of migrating of all of the expansion cards in Terraforming Mars. Today is the first and last episode about Prelude, since this expansion only includes 7 project cards. First of all, some of you might ask how I will rank these cards and what will happen with the base game cards I've ranked in the 41 episodes it took me to get through the base game deck. To answer the first question, I will rank the Prelude cards with the same old rating system that you can find in the description, and that was explained in the first episode of rating base game cards. And also, I will create separate tier lists for all expansions. And these tier lists will for now only include the project cards that are introduced with that specific expansion. At some later point, I will fill these tier lists with the base game cards as well, and that brings me to my next point. I will not talk about the impact that Prelude has on the base game project cards in this video. As I said, I'll do that in a later one. But as always, if you want insight into the grading system, check out the description, or click on the link in the top right hand corner to get to the first video, where I explain it all. But let's get started. We start off the ranking of the Prelude projects with house printing. This card is not particularly noteworthy. It's a mix between production and points, and not a very good deal besides. Mine costs 4+3, Dust Seals costs 2+3, that's 12 in total, while house printing costs 13 to buy and play. And why do you want to play it? Early on, when you don't care about the point, or later when the production doesn't really matter anymore? It's just an awkward card with really only a few use cases. For one, it's okay in the early to mid game as a steel sink, but not great at that, because all it grants is more steel prot. Hooray, you probably have too much of that anyway if you need a steel sink. Other than that, it's an okay development card for the likes of Vitor and CSM, corps I can finally talk about in the series since we've moved on to Prelude. And then, of course, it can be useful for builder, miner and contractor. But all of that should not leave the impression that house printing is a particularly amazing card. It's definitely below average and will therefore land in D tier. We get to another mediocre building tech with Lava Tube Settlement. This is probably the most underwhelming city card in the game. Underground City is still a bit worse since it's so much more expensive, but at least that one is freely placeable on all maps. That's the first of Lava Tube Settlement's problems, being restricted to volcanic areas. On Tharsis, I'd say only Pervonis and Asia are decent city spots. Not amazing, especially if you don't own Noctis, but serviceable. Ascrius and Tharsis Tholis are just bad. On Elysium, Asia Mons is fine, again not great but fine, and Olympus and Elysium Mons have amazing placement bonuses, but as city spots they are not great. And Hecato's Solace is just really bad. So on these two maps, Lava Tube Settlement has to be placed on spots that you would not place your city on if the map was empty and you had a choice. At least, you can force it down there even if there are cities right next to it. Due to that, you can sometimes really annoy your opponents and steal some of their points. On Hellas, however, you can freely place Lava Tube Settlement, but there we get to the second problem of it. It doesn't offer particularly great value. Cupola City is just 1 MC more expensive and yields 1 more MC prot. Sure, it has a max requirement, but Lava Tube can also sometimes not be placed in the late game if all spots are blocked, at least on Tharsis and Elysium. So I still consider Cupola as being much stronger than Lava Tube. All in all, I think Lava Tube is underwhelming and should land in D tier as well. Next up, we get to Martian Survey. You can compare this to either Research or Tech Demo. Both comparisons don't end favorably for Martian Survey. Research and Tech Demo can be played in a late game, while Survey cannot. That's already huge, because all of these cards can be massively improved by combo cards like Marziu, Olympus or Media Group, and in the late game you're most likely to have those down. If you want to play these cards early on, however, Survey is still worse, since Research holds 2 permanent science tags, making it much better as an enabler of AI, AGT and Mass, and Tech Demo is just much cheaper and can be paid for with Titanium. So Survey is worse than Research and Tech Demo, I think we can all agree on that. But how bad is it exactly? I think this is one of those difficult to place cards somewhere between D and C tier, and I think it will end up in D tier for me. But finally we get to an actually good card. Psychrophiles is the best action microbe I have discussed in this series so far. It doesn't beat the passive decomposers for me, and obviously is not as impactful as the best microbe tech overall, insects, but it damn well is one of the best development cards. Why? You can compare it to Sponsors, which grants the same amount of production but for 6MC more. Why 6MC more? Because Psychrophiles gets an activation in the gen you play it. Of course, you cannot use the Psychro microbes on any card, so it's more like mine. But the good thing is, plant techs are amazing overall, and many of them are also great late game cards, so the risk of you running out of them is very low. And even if you do at some points, only one 6MC plant tech that you can completely pay for with microbes is already enough for Psychrophiles to pay back. And in addition to that, you also get a super useful stall action, attack for Ecologist, and potentially some resources for Eccentric. Psychrophiles is just super good value, and you should always play it if you get the chance before its max requirement. At the same time, it's not that terribly impactful and unplayable for 2/3 of the game, and therefore I'll place it in B tier. The Prelude expansion introduced one new concept to the game, other than the Preludes of course. Wild tags. And Research Coordination is the only project card with a wild tag in this deck. So how good is it? Well, as I already said in my tags tier list, the wild tag is the best tag in the entire game, and therefore the only card that holds it brings a lot of utility, even though it does nothing other than grant that tag. It can be used for milestones and all kinds of combos, and for that, I'm often willing to pay 4+3 MC. If this is the last tag I need for AI, AGT or NRA, you can bet your ass off that I would pay even double its price. Simultaneously, sometimes it's wholly unnecessary. It also doesn't work for on-play effects, and it doesn't count towards any awards. And also, it doesn't do anything on its own, so for me, Research Coordination is B tier. They really shit the bed with the building tags in Prelude, because the next one is the underwhelming SF Memorial. I said about rover construction that it was a steel dump for the sake of dumping steel, and SF Memorial is kinda the same. If you have steel left over and nothing to do with it, you might as well play it and hope to draw into something not as useless. Because on its own, it's not great. It costs 5 MC more than Dust Seals, and you only get a card on top of it. Well, that's not exactly true. Dust Seals would be a much better card if you could play it in a late game, when you actually want to get a point card down, and sure thing you can do that with SF Memorial. So yeah, it is a steel dump, it helps on Builder and Contractor, and similarly to house printing, it's okay for Vitor and CSM. But still, D tier for me. But let's end the episode on a high note with Space Hotels. This card is a solid production card and one more reason why Earth tags are so great and go well together. If we compare it to Sponsors and Acquired Company, our two most trusty and most basic development cards, we see that it pays off 1 gen sooner, in 4 gens instead of 5, and that it also has a space tag, letting you pay for it with titanium. In exchange, it has a 2 Earth tag requirement. More often than not, and especially when playing with Preludes, where you can get 1 or even 2 Earth tags for free, this is not a problem. But if you don't get this requirement dealt with in the first 4 gens, you run into the same problem as with all production cards. At some point, they are just not worth it anymore. Of course, you can elongate the period in which Space Hotels is good by a bit by playing Earth Office or 1 or more of the space discounts. But in the end, it's still just MC Prod, which is less impactful than card draw, points, TR, or whatever, at least by the mid game. So overall, even though it's better than Sponsors and Acquired Company, I think this card still needs to be placed in C tier. Thanks so much for watching. Let me know in the comments whether you agree with my ratings or if not, how you would have rated these cards differently. Also, if you enjoyed the video, please leave a like and consider subscribing. And lastly, please check out my Twitch and my Twitter. See you in the next video.